you, John, for that very kind introduction. It's a pleasure to be here. And Tulsa Mayor, it's always great to be in your fine city. And I appreciate the opportunity to be able to come and visit with so many of our civic leaders and outstanding business owners and citizens of Tulsa County. So thank you for the opportunity to speak to your Rotary Club. I have actually been a member of Rotary for many, many years, since the early 90s, and have enjoyed my time. And I want to say thank you for all that your Rotary Club does for so many different organizations and groups, and raising money and helping with different causes. It's one of the things that makes Oklahoma so great, is our great organizations in our state. I also want to tell you that I have spent during my time in this campaign coming to Tulsa and Tulsa County mostly around 1 to 2, sometimes 3 days a week coming to Tulsa. And I want you to know that, because I know many times Tulsa feels left out. And so I have tried to come to Tulsa as much as possible to talk to you about the future of Oklahoma and my plans for the state. And I want to make this commitment to you right now, that if I have the opportunity to serve as your governor, that I will continue to make Tulsa a priority, and I will have Tulsa people in my administration. So I want you to know that. And by the way, Jerry and I are good friends. We've had a great time on the campaign trail, so we're thrilled to be here. I want to quickly introduce my husband, Wade Christensen, who is a graduate from TU University Law School. Now, I've got just a few minutes to tell you why I'm running for governor of the state of Oklahoma. I want to tell you about the Fallon plan for the future of our state. We need a governor who's going to focus on getting Oklahoma's economy back on track. And that means focusing on jobs and growing our economy. And we're going to do that in Oklahoma by lowering our taxes on individuals and on our businesses. It means that we have to address the cost drivers of doing business in our state, the high cost of workers' compensation, more tort reform in the state of Oklahoma. It also means that we have to improve education in our state. It means that we have to get money into the classroom where our students and our teachers need that money. It means that we have to have academic performance standards and raise the bar on academics. It means that we have to have quality, effective teachers in the classroom. And that will be one of my top goals, is making Oklahoma one of the most business-friendly states in the nation, where not only businesses will want to stay here, but businesses will want to come here, and people will want to raise their families in Oklahoma. The second pillar of my platform is that government has to work for us. Government has to be efficient and effective, smaller and smarter. One of the first things I'm going to do is bring together some of the great people that I have met around the state of Oklahoma to focus on reforming government. The third thing in my pillar is that you will have a governor in me that will stand up to Washington when Washington intrudes upon our personal freedoms and our rights, and will stand up to Washington when it does things that will kill economic growth and opportunity for our state. And I promise you that no one will work harder for Oklahoma. No one.
Thank you very much, and it is a treat to be back here with you. As I was thinking earlier today, my first time to visit this Rotary Club was probably 4 years ago, while I was campaigning for the current position of Lieutenant Governor. And you have been kind enough to invite me back a couple of times as Lieutenant Governor. So I know my way here. Thank you very much. So you better invite me again, because I'll be back. You know, coming from southwest Oklahoma, coming from down in Duncan and Stevens County, I knew once I began the opportunity to serve in public office that it was important for me to have a better perspective of what happened around the state. And from the years that I specifically chaired the Oklahoma Pardon and Parole Board, Tulsa, and groups and interested parties in Tulsa have always invited me to participate in issues that were of community importance to you. And because of that, I've learned over the years that I truly believe Tulsa is one of the more progressive areas in the state of Oklahoma, and that you are always willing to try something new. Whether it's pilot projects regarding healthcare like Bedlam Clinic, whether it is pilot projects regarding women in incarceration and trying to reunite them with their children, you always are there to try to figure out a way to do better what the state's not doing so well statewide. As I continue to try to focus on what I think is important around the state, those same issues are important here. We hear often about transportation and the need to make sure that we have a good infrastructure for transportation in this state, because it's essential to economic development. And that's why I know that the Gilcrease Expressway has been an important target for the Tulsa area chamber and the regional communities that can be served by that expressway. I know that healthcare continues to be an issue statewide, and this community has the facilities for healthcare education that doesn't just provide doctors for your areas, but the hospitals here help provide, the schools here help provide doctors for rural communities all across this state. And it is important to us, it is important to the state of Oklahoma, that those facilities remain strong and that we continue to have graduates from the medical schools here. The river development, which I think has such great potential, I believe will be a magnet for economic development in this area. It will not just be the commercial retail that has the chance to spring up there, but the chance of growing that area into entertainment districts that also make it a tourism destination. Tourism also includes hotel, restaurant, entertainment dollars. So the opportunity to grow that development in a way that expands beyond just the jobs that are created, those are the kinds of issues that I think are important here in Tulsa, important to the governor that works in Oklahoma City, but they translate to the same kinds of goals we need to have all across the state of Oklahoma. Thank you.
State questions.
I think we're pretty clear on where both of us are on state question 744. I'm a big believer that there needs to be more resources put into the classrooms, specifically into our classrooms in this state. But 744 does not provide a funding mechanism. The last major educational reform bill, House Bill 1017, included revenue enhancers, included tax increases at that time. If 744 passes, there is no mechanism in their state where the state of Oklahoma is supposed to come up with the money. That lends itself to a belief in this state that it would require shifting resources from other services that are provided by the state. As governor, there are very few areas where, in Oklahoma, where the governor gets to have a significant impact on policy, and appropriations is one of them. 744 as governor would tie my hands on my ability to help set some of the priorities in this state.
I am opposed to state question 744. As I said in my opening comments, education is a priority in my administration, and I will do all that I can to focus on making education stronger and better for all of our state. But state question 744 will say that Oklahoma has to meet the regional averages of what other states put in towards education funding. It has been estimated that it will take somewhere between $850 million to over $1 billion out of our current state budget at a time when our legislature just had a $1.2 billion shortfall last year and just cut state spending by almost all the state agencies, from anywhere from 5% to 20%, depending on what the state agency was. So we're going to have probably another $1 billion, maybe $1 billion shortfall this coming year, and another $850 million that will be taken out with 744, which leaves a huge gap in the budget. So as governor, it would create huge challenges for balancing the budget. It will mean that we will have to continue to cut other state services, whether roads and bridges, healthcare, law enforcement, corrections. Could be devastating to state services, and the only two options you have to meet the challenges of $850 million going to education is to either increase taxes, which I won't do, or secondly, to further cut government spending. It's estimated it could be cut up to 20% on top of what was just cut last year with the budget deficits that we had. So I would encourage all Oklahomans to really pay attention to this issue, to read it. It could have devastating impacts on our state budget and certainly on jobs and our economy.
So if you're following along, I just put no and no on it. The next several questions we're going to have, the candidates will have a minute each. The first one is state question 746, which deals with the presentation of a voter ID, and Congresswoman Fallon, you will start.
I'm for it. Voter registration and voting is something that's very important. I think we need to have accountability, transparency, and so I'm for it.
Lieutenant Governor.
I haven't seen, this bill is, this particular state question is not about voter registration, it's about voting at the polls. And our current law is pretty specific. If a poll worker does not recognize or believe that the person casting the vote is the person who is registered registered there to vote, that they have the right to ask them for identification. I'm opposed to this because I'm concerned about the over 78,000 Oklahomans who are 18 years of age and older who do not have a photo ID, a photo ID. And I know that many of those become our more elderly citizens once they either are incapable of driving or are no longer want to drive, and so they don't have that photo ID mechanism. And how we put that in place to make sure they are not disenfranchised as voting is something that concerns me, the way this legislation is worded.
Thank you. State question 747. We now have term limits for the governor's office, but the other statewide officers, with the exception of the Corporation Commission, are you for term limits? This one goes first to Lieutenant Governor Askins.
It's not going to affect me, so whatever the people decide are going to be fine. I personally think it's going to lend itself to job hopping among statewide elected officials. I think this will pass just like term limits did for the legislature back in 1991, whenever it was.
I've always limited myself to term limits. I limited myself when I was lieutenant governor to 12 years, limited myself in Congress to 4 years, legislature to 4 years. So I do support it, and I have no problem with it.
Thank you. State question 748. This is about, I guess next spring, Oklahoma is going to redraw the legislative districts. This state question reorganizes the manner in which that is done. And this one goes first to Congresswoman Fallon.
Well, this is the year when we'll have reapportionment and legislative districts that will be redrawn in our congressional districts based upon the census, and it will be a function of the governor to sign that. But I have no problem with this state question. I'll be voting yes on it.
Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, it's a yes question for me. I can tell you that this apportionment committee has never met in the history of the state of Oklahoma. This committee is only required to meet on state legislative districts if the legislature is unable to come up with a solution. I do think that long-term, it would be wise for us to change and go to an apportionment commission like some other states do and totally remove this from a legislative political process. I think that's the wave of the future for the state of Oklahoma. This is a small first step.
Thank you. The next one, question 750, is about the required number of signatures on an initiative or referendum petition. Lieutenant Governor, you have the lead on this.
This question actually changes to where right now the number of signatures required is based upon general election cycles. This would specify that it's based on the number of votes cast in a gubernatorial race. So you would know what that number is for a period of 4 years. I have no problem with it. Clearly, looking at the length of the state questions this year, we don't have a real problem in getting issues to the ballot in Oklahoma.
I support it too, but I will say that there are 11 state questions on the ballot this year, and it may add more state questions to the state ballot. It would actually make it easier by lowering the number of required signatures on a petition based upon the recommendation of the governor that year. So we may see more questions on the state ballot, but I'm still for the question.
Thank you. State question 751. Should we require that the English language be used when Oklahoma takes official state action? Congresswoman Fallon.
Yes, I'm for it.
Lieutenant Governor.
Yes, and I think the author of this bill worked really hard to make sure that there was no restrictions put on private businesses that wish to reach out to communities in their own areas to make sure that their information can get distributed.
Okay, thank you. State question 752 reorganizes the commission that nominates judges or justices to the governor. Lieutenant Governor, should we approve that or not?
Well, I don't think so. I've been through the judicial nominating committee process. I'll tell you, I didn't make it out of that commission. And I've been through the process from the side of working in the governor's office to make recommendations. Right now, it is not a politicized process. If you add these two appointments, you are allowing politics to enter into the addition of naming people to the nominating commission, in my opinion.
Congresswoman Fallon.
I am actually for it. I don't think it hurts to add a couple more eyes onto the nominating committee, and so I'm for it.
State question 754. This deals with whether the Constitution can be allowed to require the legislature to tie state funding of certain issues to predetermined formulas or how other states fund theirs. This goes first to Congresswoman Fallon. Should we vote for 754 or against it?
Well, I am for the concept of 754, which actually was passed by the legislature to counterbalance State Question 744, saying that Oklahoma would not be making spending decisions based upon what other states do. And I think that is a wise concept. But I've heard just this week that there may be some challenges with the language itself as it relates to other state formulas and how we spend money for other entities and services. So I'm going to actually take a closer look at this, but in the beginning, I will tell you that I am for the state question from the standpoint that if it counterbalances State Question 744, if it should pass 754, my understanding would make that null and void if it got the higher number of votes. So initially I would say I've been for it, but I do want to take a look at whether it would have any other effect upon other percentages and state questions.
Lieutenant Governor Askins.
Funding formulas, I should say.
As I've read State Question 754, it's pretty clear that I think there's some unintended consequences in it, and that is that even though it was targeting State Question 744, the education bill, this bill, the way it reads, the language would repeal every other formula that currently exists. But more importantly for me, from my background as a judge, there's language in there that says if we vote for this amendment to the Constitution, the language in it says this particular language could never be amended or repealed. And I can tell you that will cause a constitutional question that will end up in the courts.
Yes or no?
That would be a no.
No. Thank you. All right, State Question 755.
Go ahead.
Should we make Oklahoma state courts rely on federal and state law when deciding cases, and forbid Oklahoma state courts from relying on international law or Sharia law? This one goes first to Lieutenant Governor Askins.
This is another one of those that I think I understand the intent, but I believe the language has unintended consequences. I'm a no on this because the way it says you cannot rely on any other kind of international law. And the last time I remember looking at my old notes from law school, most of America's jurisprudence system was based on England and jurisprudence there. So I think we need to be really smarter about how we phrase some of these things. So I'm a no on this one.
Congresswoman.
Well, I am against Sharia law as far as basing Oklahoma's law. It should be based on our state and federal law of America. And I think that's what the intent was by its author when they initially put this on the ballot. So I'm against using any other law, Sharia law, to base our judicial decisions on. But that is also something else I think we need to carefully look at and make sure it does what it's intended to do.
With respect to State Question 756, no or yes?
You guys are holding us accountable. Jerry, there's a tough crowd out here. Well, I would say, yes, I was for it, but in line with what she said, I'm a reasonable person and I want to look at it, and I think all of us should. So I want to check out and see if there could be some problems with it, and we don't need to be doing something in Oklahoma that's going to create problems on down the line with our judicial system. So just like all of you, I'm going to look at it too.
Final answer? All right. May I proceed? State Question 756. Well, 2 minutes each. This is the federal health care bill. Questions. Should we vote for this? Should we vote against it? Should Oklahoma opt out? Should it not opt out? Should Oklahoma join the other 20 other states or so who have sued to reject it or not? Tell us the pros and cons and why you think we should or should not vote on State Question 756 for the proposal. And this one goes first to Congresswoman Fallon.
I'm going to vote yes on this. I would like to see Oklahoma have the opportunity to opt out of any federal mandates from Obamacare. I did not vote for President Obama's health care bill when it came through Congress. I've been very vocal on my opinion on that. If I'd been governor and if the legislature had sent me a bill challenging its constitutionality, which I believe it could be unconstitutional, I would have signed that to challenge it as a governor. But being in Congress during the debate over the past 2 years on health care, I personally do not believe we should be turning over our personal choice and decisions to the federal government to decide how, when, and where, and how much health care we're going to have. The health care bill does increase taxes. It does have a huge amount of deficit spending, over $1 trillion of new spending. I do think it takes away our personal freedoms and rights to decide our health care. It will lead to rationing of care. It has almost $500 million over the next 10 years of unfunded mandates that will be passed on down to the state budget. And I'm opposed to Obama's health care bill.
Lieutenant Governor.
So the answer I would also give would be yes on this. I can tell you that coming from a family of small business people, as we've tried to put the pencil to what the cost would be, there may be some parts of it that I like pre-existing condition and having an opportunity if you change insurance coverage to be able to transfer your coverage and be able to cover your family. The opportunity to cover your children. Some of you think they're never going to get out of college, but being able to cover them for at least during that period of time is helpful. But any way you put the pencil to it, it costs the state of Oklahoma too much. I wish that it had been set up in a way that this bill would have allowed Oklahoma the opportunity to take care of Oklahomans, whether through programs like our Insure Oklahoma, what we do with children with Sooner Care. I think Oklahoma has proven we can do pretty well. We just wish we had more dollars to be able to help. We can't help with the cost of this bill.
Okay, thank you. State question 757 is the last of the state questions. There'll be a minute each. And the question is, should we increase the amount of the rainy day fund from 10% to 15% of the previous year's general revenue?
Absolutely, yes. There's no question, and it was really kind of frustrating back in the 5 or 6 years ago when we actually did have revenues that came in higher than expected, because a lot of people don't realize that the money that goes into the rainy day fund is that money that comes in over the estimated amount. And there's a cap on it, and when 10% more than what was estimated the year before is received, that's the cap. That 10% is all that can go in there. This state question would allow that cap to go up to, if revenues exceed 15% of what the original year's certification was, to be placed. If we had been able to do that a few years ago, we would have had a little bit more money to help us while the economy's been down the last 2 years.
Congresswoman.
I'm going to vote yes on it too. After being in public service for 20 years in the legislature and 12 years in the executive branch and of course in Congress now, I've been through several ups and downs in Oklahoma's economy when we had revenue surpluses and when we had revenue shortfalls. And so increasing the amount of money that we have in our state's savings account or rainy day account for tough, challenging times, I think is good public policy. But I think we also have to get a handle on our spending as a state, and we wouldn't have some of these challenges that we have when the economy does take a downturn. So I am for putting more money in our savings account or rainy day fund.
Thank you. Okay, that's the end of state questions. We will now move to some additional questions that have been submitted by members of the club. The first question will go to Congresswoman Fallon. The question is, if at the end of your term as governor, you have been able to change one statistic about Oklahomans, such as poverty, average income, health insurance, health insured children, women's health, etc., what would that statistic be? What is the major barrier to your accomplishing that goal, and how will you overcome that barrier?
One of the major platforms in my agenda, the ballot plan, is to create jobs and grow the economy. And when we do that, Oklahomans are going to have a better standard of living. And not just creating any type of job, but create good-paying jobs. And when we create those good-paying jobs, our children are going to stay in the state of Oklahoma, hopefully. They're going to have a better future here in our state. And that's why I enumerated several things that we need to do as a state to move forward, focusing on making Oklahoma more business-friendly, creating quality education, making government right-sized, because it's our money as taxpayers and businesses that fund government itself. And so raising our standard of living improving our quality of life, growing a stronger economy in our state so we can be more attractive, not only retaining businesses, but keeping businesses, so our families can have a lifestyle that they deserve and frankly that they need moving forward.
Lieutenant Governor.
Well, the one statistic that I hope goes down would be the unemployment statistic. I don't know that as governor I will specifically be responsible for it. I really think you all as the small business men and women of the state have more of an impact on that. So I would tell you the statistic that I do hope that I have an opportunity to have an impact on is lowering the number of high school dropouts that we have, because they are your future workforce. And we can't get those kids into college or to career tech or to get the kinds of higher education and skill training they need to fill the jobs we want you to create if we can't get them out of high school first. So with a new state superintendent of public instruction, a new cabinet secretary for education, I really look forward to trying to help Oklahoma reduce the rate of high school dropouts.
Thank you. The next question is first for Lieutenant Governor Askins. If, as predicted, Oklahoma faces a $1 billion drop in revenue in the next fiscal year, what programs will you cut first? What programs will you cut last? And what will you do to help fund unfunded obligations of the state, like the teacher's retirement system?
Well, you're not going to solve teacher retirement system in the next 2 years because the economy's not going to get that much better that fast. But I can tell you that the only way that I know to approach the priorities of how we spend is to change the way the legislature does the budgeting process. I can't control how they change it, how they do it this particular year, but I really would like to try to visit with the new speaker and the new leader in the state Senate and talk to them about focusing this entire legislative session on 2 issues, reapportionment, which we have to do every 10 years, and secondly, the budget, and do it from the beginning of session and invite all legislators to be members of the subcommittees on appropriations like I used to chair. Because when all of those members are involved, we have an opportunity to put a better magnifying glass to how each agency is spending each line item of their budget. When we do that, I think we've made a significant cuts across the state government over the last several years. There's not a lot of fat left, but you know what? Some agencies still may have similar programs that serve similar constituencies. And this is the time for us to figure out how we can best serve those constituencies, how we can save those dollars. To be able to get out of this budget, we need to take care of education. We need to be sure public safety, transportation, and we also need to watch out for those dollars that have federal match, whether they be in the health and mental health issues, because there's no point in hurting ourselves twice by losing that $2 to $3 match.
Thank you. The next question is for... Oh, I'm sorry.
It happens every time we're someplace, John, so we kind of get used to it. You just think you're in charge.
We're in for a new age in the state of Oklahoma.
I feel like girls gone wild.
Congresswoman.
Thanks. John and I went to college together, so we're okay here. Let me just first of all say, these are very challenging times for our state and even challenging times for our nation. And people are very worried about our economy. They're very worried about state services, how we're going to balance the budget. It is estimated that we're going to have a budget shortfall next year. I hear anywhere from $600 million to over $1 billion in a budget shortfall. All depends upon how our economy does, and it's rebounding. And that's why focusing on creating the very best business climate possible for our state is my top priority, because if we don't retain the jobs we have, bring more business to the state of Oklahoma, lower the cost of doing business, improve education, we're not going to have the revenue from the companies and the employees that are in the state to set towards the priorities of education, roads and bridges, law enforcement, corrections, healthcare services, senior nutrition programs, and things that we've had to worry about cutting, like in this past legislative session. And so those will be top priorities of mine. And when I first become governor, we're going to focus on the priorities and the budget and making sure we get things right. I also mentioned making government right-sized, focus on making government relevant to its mission. You know, we have some government agencies that were formed 40, 50, 60 years ago. Some of them are operating on 8-track technology in an iPod age. And so we have to work on making government relevant, efficient, effective, and that way we'll have money to put towards the important priorities of teacher retirement system, education, healthcare, you know, those things that I mentioned. But I'm going to be a governor who's going to really do everything that I can to create jobs and create those opportunities so we will have the revenue that we need for important essential government services.
Thank you. Our next question is for Congresswoman Fallon first, and then I assure Lieutenant Governor Askins she'll have an opportunity. You both have alluded to education. What actions will you take to make education in Oklahoma more productive and more efficient? And what is the biggest obstacle for education? It's a perennial issue. What is it that continues to keep us from breaking out in terms of educating our children, particularly K through 12? This would be a 2-minute each.
My turn, John?
Yes.
Thank you. Well, let me just say, education is the key to our economic growth in our state, too, because if we don't have a quality educated workforce, we can't attract or retain quality jobs in our state. So education is a main pillar of my platform. Wade and I have 6 children between the two of us. We know as parents the importance of education. Let me just tell you this. There's a saying in education that says the 1st through the 3rd grade, a child learns how to read. The 4th grade on, a child reads to learn. And if a child can't read, they can't learn the math and the science and the social studies and the important core knowledge subjects that they're going to need to be successful to graduate from high school, to go on to get a career technical skill, or hopefully to go on to college. We need to work on the numbers of increasing our high school graduates, getting career skills, and certainly our college graduates in our state. Getting more parents involved in education is important. More local control, I think, is important too. Having standards, having accountability, getting the money into the classroom, and making sure that our children, as I said, can read at a grade appropriate level. And of course, I also want to mention that Tulsa's done a great job with early childhood and with your EduCare Center, and starting at those early ages to make sure that our children are getting what they need at those early ages too. So education is the key to our success in the future and a strong economy.
Thank you. Lieutenant Governor.
I was trying to be patient. So. I wanted you to know I really was listening, John. How can we make education more productive? Wow, I tell you what, anybody that has the silver bullet to answer that question can be anything they want to be in the state of Oklahoma. We have a difficult chore. We are spending state dollars, we're spending federal dollars, you're spending your local dollars that come from revenues here as well. And every time you're spending the citizens' money, you have to figure out how you're going to be accountable for it. The only way right now that appears to be that we as a state and a nation are saying we measure accountability is by testing. And it seems like the 12 years I was in the legislature, we changed that testing program, the grades, the courses about every other year. And I don't know how a superintendent, a school district, much less a classroom teacher, figures out what it is they're trying to teach. Oklahoma prepares teachers well. We rate very high in our teacher prep. We need to make sure as a state, just as we complain about the mandates that come from the federal government, we must make sure as a state that we are not passing on additional mandates at the local school district level. Our local school district should have parents who are engaged as supporters of that school district. Not everyone does. Inner city schools often don't. But you know, we've got to be able to give the flexibility to solve problems, because what is a problem in Claremore Public Schools may not be the same problem or need the same solution that Duncan has. So we need to make sure that we are not handcuffing our teachers. We need to make sure that they have the flexibility to teach the new way, to teach the ways they are being taught in school. And we need to make sure that they have the resources available, whether it's smart boards or whatever new technology is required, to capture the imagination of those children and your grandchildren who may be in schools today. I'm out of time.
Thank you. Our next question is first for Lieutenant Governor Askins, and it deals with transportation. When we read the articles in the paper about the number of bridges that are subpar in terms of their condition, and then you drive around some of the state roads, you can't believe really that we have an active program for taking care of our roads. What will you do as the leader of our state government to find the money to fix our roads and bridges?
I am really pleased with the plan that I think the Oklahoma Department of Transportation has had the last couple of years. It seems like from when I started in the legislature to now, the process of determining the priorities for roads and bridges in the state has become not politicized. And that is a huge step forward toward making sure that the dollars go where the need is greatest. I want to protect the funding changes that occurred in about 2005 and 2006, where the state of Oklahoma made a commitment of certain revenues going to transportation, state dollars for roads and bridges. As to additional money, it's important for the governor to engage in regular conversations with the congressmen and women and the U.S. senators to make sure that we are all on the same page when it comes to fighting for those dollars that we want to come to Oklahoma. We need to continue to do that. We know we're getting some improvements this year. You're seeing them here in the Tulsa area because of the federal stimulus money. That's a good use of that federal stimulus money. It's a one-time capital expense. It's not creating an additional hole in our state budget. And I'm pleased to see the progress that's being made. But I'm telling you, when you're trying to campaign around the state, these roadblocks take longer to get there.
Congresswoman.
Transportation has been a major issue I've worked on for the last 4 years. As a member of Congress, I had the great honor and pleasure of serving and representing Oklahoma on the Transportation Committee in Congress as the only member from Oklahoma. And one of the first things I want to do is make sure, hopefully, that James Langford, if he takes my place in Congress, gets on that Transportation Committee so he can be there to represent Oklahoma in our interests on the next highway reauthorization bill. Hopefully, we'll get that done in Congress. I was very disappointed we didn't get that done this past year. But I have worked on transportation issues for a very long time. Oklahoma has done a great job at setting our priorities as to what's the most need around the state of Oklahoma. It's done a great job of being accountable for those funds. And the opportunity last year to bring the Democrat chairman of the Transportation Committee from Congress to Tulsa to look at how the stimulus money was being spent. Look at your roads and your bridges and your needs here. Of course, the needs across the state of Oklahoma. But as governor, I'll do everything I can to make sure our plan is a good plan, that it takes politics out, that we find every bit of funding source that we can to go towards roads and bridges. It's embarrassing that Oklahoma ranks so low in our quality of our bridges and our roads. We have $11 billion of backlog needs in our state. Growing the economy, focusing on creating jobs and creating the revenue is one of the best ways that we'll have more money to put towards roads and bridges in the state of Oklahoma.
Thank you. The next question goes to Congresswoman Fallon first. Should persons in this country illegally who do not pay taxes be allowed to receive public assistance? That's the first part. The second part, briefly, what is the Arizona strategy, and should Oklahoma adopt that strategy?
Well, I have been on record saying that I support what Arizona is trying to do, trying to secure their borders, trying to keep illegal immigrants out of their state, and frankly taking a very tough stand against the drug cartels that are entering into their borders. As a member of Congress, I've also had the opportunity to go down to the borders and to work with border security and ICE, and I've seen the illegal aliens coming across our borders. And as a member of Congress, I've also had the opportunity to swear in naturalized citizens who want to follow the law and want to become legal citizens. And it's a great thing that we have in America where people can come here and immigrate here legally. But I do support what Arizona is doing. I think it's important for our national security. It's important for our economic security as a nation that we secure our borders. I think it's very important that we stand tough against the drug cartels that have come into the United States and wreaked havoc with our citizens and certainly our states. And of course, illegal immigrants do have a huge impact upon state services and upon the amount of money that is used for the illegals that are here.
Lieutenant Governor.
There's no question that the United States of America has to control its borders, and our southern border seems to cause us a lot more problems than the Canadian border. And if Congress and the federal administrations, two different presidents, haven't addressed this issue yet, then I think you're going to see 48 other states do what Oklahoma and Arizona have already done, because they're tired of it. They're tired of that frustration. But I think we have to be careful. And just as the Congresswoman said, she has enjoyed seeing the swearing-in ceremonies for those naturalized citizens. We need to make sure that that is an obstacle that can be reached for those who are here and are trying to achieve that status. It should not take them more than a decade, and it should not take them thousands and thousands of dollars. It is not fair for us to delay that process for those men and women who are trying to pay their taxes, raise their families, and do many of the things our ancestors did when they came to Oklahoma.
Thank you. This concludes the question part. We will now have closing statements and final remarks.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the opportunity to be able to spend time with your Rotary. Let me just start out by saying these are challenging times for our state and certainly challenging times for our nation. And many people are concerned about where we are going as a nation. And I believe that I, as governor, can bring my life experiences as a private sector individual, managing a payroll, worrying about profit losses, as a legislator, as a lieutenant governor, working in the executive branch, standing on tough issues like right to work, workers' comp, focusing on government reform, bringing aerospace jobs to the state of Oklahoma, serving as a member of Congress during some very tough battles, fighting against the federal government takeover of our healthcare system, fighting against cap and trade, which I believe would ruin our oil and gas industry and destroy jobs, fighting against unfunded mandates. You need a governor that's willing to be bold and strong and provide the leadership that can lead Oklahoma to economic recovery, focus on jobs and opportunity, right-sizing state government, focusing on education, giving our children the education they need, and also having a government that will stand up when Washington intrudes in our personal lives, intrudes in our business lives. That's the kind of governor that I will be. I have a proven track record over the last 20 years of public service of doing those things. And these are challenging times for our state, and I personally believe it's going to be the governors who are going to lead America back to where America needs to be. I need your help. We can do this together. We can bring Oklahoma to a more prosperous, better future, working together as Oklahomans. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you very much, and thank you to the Tulsa Rotary Club for inviting us. It's a real treat to have been able to be here and share with you today. You know, we can get invited, but if you all don't show up, it's not nearly as much fun if you talk to an empty house. So thank you all for being here. Yes, it is tough times. We know that regardless of how difficult it's been to fund state services the last 2 years, I think it's going to be difficult for the next 18 to 24 months. So having a governor that has a background in the appropriation process, 10 out of my 12 years I served on the committee, 8 out of those years I was either vice chair or 6 years as chair of a budget committee. We know that we have to make decisions that are going to not just change the way government works, but we're going to have to make decisions that also help plan for our future. We have to be careful about what we do. We cannot erode the basis, the foundation of what Oklahoma has to offer. When we make these cuts, we need to make sure that education is kept intact. We have to make sure that the essential services of the state are protected. Corrections, public safety, road and bridges, health and mental health. If we don't protect that foundation, then when our economy improves, we're not going to have anything to build upon. We're going to have to start over. So we have to be smart and forward thinking about what we do. This is going to extend beyond the term of any next governor or legislative leaders. We need long-range planning. That's what I'm used to. I have served 12 years in the legislature and even my 4 years as lieutenant governor. I have a reputation for rolling up my sleeves and getting to work. I'm used to dealing with different kinds of constituencies, whether it's urban versus rural, whether it's east side of the state versus west side, or yes, whether it's across political aisles. And I have a reputation of being able to find those people who really want to work to solving problems to figure out how we're going to build a consensus to get the job done. That's what I bring to the table. That's what I want to do as your governor. I hope you'll give me your support on November 2nd. Thank you very much.
Now let's show our appreciation.